Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining, and thanks, Deb, for giving me the opportunity to present to you. I'm going to speak to you a little bit about job specs, and on the surface, I guess that's not a particularly exciting subject, but this is kind of a two-pronged presentation. Half of it will look at the fundamental changes we can make as IBM Talent Acquisition and Optimization in the way in which client businesses approach recruiting and defining what they're looking for. And half of it will focus on some of the tools which IBM have available, some of which I hadn't heard of until I started putting this project together, and some of which I've just started to implement. So this is still a bit of a work in progress for me. Some of you will no doubt be ahead of my account, and for that I apologise. But some of you will be looking at some of this and keen to know more. But I guess what I'd like to do is document how we're moving forwards in my account from one extreme to the other in a lot of senses, and also encourage open discussion on next steps and other innovations at the end of the call. In an ever-changing world, it's not enough to be as good as everyone else. Sounds like a quote that could have been. I was looking for quotes, and I thought Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, all these inspirational people. But that one's just me, and this is something I've used to kind of change my view on the way we attract and retain talent. So I think it's worth just reviewing the ethos of IBM Talent Acquisition and Optimization. Starting at the end to design the beginning is probably a good way for me to start this presentation. RPO by design, and that's the difference that our RPO solutions offer. So on that note, let's have a look at what the end game is. Ultimately, for our clients, the thing that matters most over everything else is the hiring of the right candidate for their open roles. People make a business, and I'm sure every client that we work with will tell you that they only want to hire the absolute best in class. So what does the best look like? Well, this is a stereotypical example, but my experience tells me that the best people are often not looking for a new position, at least, and the common theme, whether they're looking or not, is that invariably they are in demand. In short, you are going to have to work quite hard to get their attention, especially as regularly they are aware of the business that you're recruiting for. So the key to attracting the best for me, and often it is just one key thing, is to stand out from the crowd in terms of competitors and other options for them. So whilst working on bringing Flowserve into the next stage of their development in the UK, I've put together a very simple 4-stage plan to boost the number of best-in-class candidates and to get the attention of the hardest people to please. It's worth, I reiterate that this is still a work in progress on my account, but we are making inroads on it, and the reaction has, generally speaking, been positive. But if that changes, I'll make sure I'll let you all know. So stage one is to insist on a job spec which you would want to read. So when I started in RPO, this was probably my biggest issue and caused me the most problems. I suppose far from demanding a job spec that I wanted to read, I would work with a hiring manager to blindly accept their job specs. In fact, as volumes go up, that becomes more of a problem, and I've been caught out by it recently too. So I've taken this image of the beginning, middle, and the end, and put it by my screen on my desk. Getting a job spec which is complete, challenged, and viable is key to everything that comes afterwards. So for me, a job spec should be a bit like a story, and as such, it will have the same structure: a start, a middle, and an end. And ideally, from my perspective, you'd want to start on a positive. So if you can find a subliminally positive angle, this will definitely help. I particularly like roles where the incumbent has been promoted. It gives a positive feeling to anybody that's coming in that the business is interested in investing in talent and developing from within. And then you move to the middle part, and the biggest mistake you ever see on a job spec from a client is that they simply list the job spec from a global catalogue. It doesn't tell you anything about how the position will develop or about the opportunities it offers for the successful applicant. And I mean, if you think about it from your own perspective, if you were going to change jobs, if you were looking for a new role, would you want to move into a business where you had no idea about the long-term future, just a list of duties to complete? I think from my perspective, I certainly wouldn't want to do that. And the thing is, you can't be afraid to ask for that information. A hiring manager that wants to fill their position will be happy to spend the time setting this information out to you to make their role more attractive to the market. And at the end, well, for me, should really focus the mind of the person looking at it on what's in it for them. Good salary, pension, health, all great. Career prospects tend to be better. From my experience, it's not always about money. Planned expansions and a vision for how the role in the business will develop for the future is important. Now, one of the challenges as Flowserve are that they tend to be medium payers, but we do tend to focus very heavily on development, and there's a real career opportunity to anybody that's coming in to the organisation. And so we tend to focus on that side of things. Producing a compelling advert is the second stage, and that can be completely different to the job spec, unless the client stipulates differently, or you've got issues with bringing people in from other countries. It can be completely different. And I wanted to kind of pull an acronym, is that what it's called, an acronym, from one of my previous managers who sadly no longer works with IBM, but I used to have a manager that had a saying that was KISS, and it's a little game on keep it simple, and then for the extra S, she added stupid, which was nice. That was just a good reflection of our relationship. But an advert is, at the end of the day, just an attraction tool. It doesn't need to give every detail of the role. Just encourage the reader to want to find out more. And if you, to take an example in the UK, and I apologise for anybody in the US, but we have a newspaper over here called The Independent. The Independent has a demographic in the UK that is aimed at about the 25-year-old to 50-year-old business person as a rule, but it's written in a manner that, or their rule of thumb is to write the articles in a manner that a 5-year-old can understand, because the simplicity that comes with it enhances the delivery of a message. So personally, when I take a job spec, I take it and break it down into its absolute simplest form. And I'd like to give you a bit of an example of this. So when I put this presentation together, I thought I'd take a snapshot of one of the job specs on the Flowserve website. So I did, and up came this, and that was the first screen grab. And then it needed a second screen grab to get all the information in. And actually it needed a third screen grab as well. And I think if you put something like this in front of somebody immediately who wasn't interested in the business before, it's an immediate turn-off from my perspective. By simplifying it, you start the process of closing the person and allowing them to visualize themselves in the position much, much earlier. So I took the most basic of key information and separated it out. I was able to move 1 page or 3 pages into 15 lines, roughly. And this has not only allowed me to change some things at the next stage of this plan, but but most of all broke down the requirements into their simplest form, so that when I'm analysing candidates or working with a recruiter to analyse them, I know exactly what I'm looking for from a high-level perspective. So before we move on to the next stage, now's perhaps a good time to come on to some of the tools which IBM offer, which I believe are fairly uniquely competitive within the RPO sector. And I'd be interested to know how aware people are of these tools and whether there's anyone who can identify any further tools as well, because I'm learning about this stuff too. But the key tools that I see are things like video voicemail, which is a process essentially of recording your job specification and promoting your client company. And you know, for anyone looking to do this, it's really simple. Sourcing Science can support you on it. If you've not got a suitable phone camera, we've now got a camera in the UK that's centrally available, and you can contact me for details on that. And I'm happy to pass those on. And these projects come with a landing page and are designed to flow traffic to the application stage. They're quite innovative. They're a different way of engaging people, and from my perspective, they're one of the strong tools for standing out from the crowd, much better than a standard piece of paper job spec. Career webinars are a way of engaging a large audience all in one go. It's also quite an innovative way to contact people, and it provides an open forum for questions, which really helps in terms of people asking, or you get a lot of crossover of questions that come up where one person might be thinking of a question and too scared to ask it. Somebody else can come along and do it. Infographics. This is probably my favorite tool right now. Having broken down a job spec into its simplest form, simplifying and using a graphical format to simplify and attract people to find out more really stands out against the generic job spec and the generic list of requirements. And there's a couple of ways of doing that, which we'll come on to in a minute. And then there are things like competitor mapping, which is massively useful as a tool. Sourcing Science will put together an organisation chart based on a number of information sources, and that allows you to identify starting points for searches, identify targets, and a whole heap of other possibilities. And underpinning all of this are multi-touch email campaigns, and these can work in conjunction with the webinars, the video voicemails, and the infographics, and they can truly achieve incredible returns. Multi-touch campaigns are some of the most successful marketing tools available, and this is all run by our friend Jeff, and is part of his little empire. So stage 3, produce something that stands out from the generic. And I'm just going to give you an example of this. Producing something that's snappy and to the point, and this is a basic one that I'm working on at the moment. It's not quite finished at the moment, more to the point. But there's a couple of options for this. Sourcing Science can put this together for you, or you can also purchase a license. I think you'd need to speak to your team leaders about that. But it's an option that's available, and it allows a quick, easy way of putting that information into a simplified document. And these can be used to promote the role. LinkedIn, email, social media, websites, all possibilities from that perspective. And then stage 4 is educating your hiring community. It's all very well going through this process, but the hardest part of getting through what many might consider to be additional work is having the time to do it. Ultimately, all of us on site and in delivery positions are busy, and things like video voicemails take a fair amount of planning to produce, sometimes 2 to 3 weeks, and by which time, from our perspective, the recs need to be filled, not at sourcing stage. So the best situation, or the best suggestion I can give, and the process I'm going through right now, is to start to produce generic versions which give you a starting point for regular roles. So for us, that's application engineers, assemblers, and warehousing type people, and use those as a basis for tweaked presentations, and then start to move towards speaking to HR and hiring managers about upcoming requisitions and get in touch with hiring managers before the recs are live if you see something particularly complex or something that you think would really benefit from a different way of presenting things, and get their basic overview and their input into how their campaign could look. In many cases, in my experience, when presented with a template, a hiring manager will produce the top level information for you, and that's great for giving you a starting point for both your documents and some points of discussion for your intake meeting. And if you see something that looks particularly complicated, try and get the cut process started earlier and get ahead of the game. The earlier we get started on the innovative stuff, the easier the job will become. And if you try these kind of simple steps, you're going to be well on the way to standing out from the crowd with your job specs and your job adverts, and taking your client from the middle of the pack to the top, making your work key to making your client an employer of choice. So overall, I wanted to open the floor up to discussion about either the current ways you're standing out from the crowd, or anything you think is worth sharing with the group in terms of tools you've used and that you've found to be useful when trying to get your job specs to the top of the pile. So, Deborah, if you can open or Hubert, if you can open the lines, and if there's any questions in chat, let's go for them.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm watching the chat room right now, so if you guys have a question and you're not able to be heard, definitely write your question in the chat box, and I'll definitely relay that information over to Brad. And of course, if you are a panelist, you are free to have a conversation and ask the question directly on the phone lines. And by the way, Brad, we have 33 people attending today's training, so awesome outcome in terms of the amount of people joining today.
This is going to cost me a fortune in drinks, isn't it?
Indeed, indeed. Happy hour on Brad.
Thanks for coming, everyone. I think I can probably guess about 24 of the people that are on the call.
Done good. It was a really great presentation, though, Brad.
No questions or comments?
Not yet. Not yet. Anybody? Anyone?
They've all got me on mute. So they're all so sick of hearing from me that they've got me on mute, telling you.
And if you do pose your question in the chat box and you do not want your name to be announced, that is perfectly fine.
Yep. So, Brad, I have a question while we wait. So a lot of the kind of roadblocks or the pushback that we get from the client side is that, you know, this isn't in line with the image or the kind of online persona that we're trying to convey. You know, we're a more formal company. We want people to come to us. We don't need to do all this extra work. That kind of arrogance or that kind of, we don't have to do this. We're X company, right? How do you overcome that pushback? How do you push those clients to realize that, you know what, just the power of brand name in the market isn't the same as before, and that they need to kind of invest and consider these innovative solutions?
I think for me it's quite simple. You can be the brand name, and I when I look at some of the local businesses around here, and I've had some conversations like that with the likes of McLaren Formula One, for example, who are a big prestige business, and they spent a long time relying on their brand and their name to attract people, and to the point that they actually did very little in terms of talent attraction and very little in terms of making sure that people were paid fairly. Their salary levels were well below industry standard, because they were relying on the brand. And what happened in that situation was they started to lose their best people. And they started to lose their best people at the top and started to lose the ability to attract new talent at the bottom. So that left a big gaping hole. And the fact is, if you rely on your brand for too long, then your brand disappears if the quality of your people goes down. And suddenly you're in a spiral whereby your brand is so damaged that you're unable to attract the people that you need. So for me, embracing innovation at every stage is massively important, because if you don't, the next person down the line will, and they'll become the brand leader, and they'll become the people that are the most attractive to the market.
Super, Brad. I do have a question that came through. The question is, how would you deal with working with a client that refers to the applicant tracking system job description as the advertising job description, where sometimes the job description is actually on page 3?
It's really hard, because there are. I mean, we have the same. A lot of the advertising is driven by the ATS system. The only thing I think you can do is change or simplify, keep the information in the ATS system as simple as possible, and point out the complexities of somebody coming in and looking at the job spec and not knowing what on earth they're meant to be doing as a role, and that's the only way I've really found it, because that is a challenge, and that is one of the things that we've had to overcome, which is why we've produced the infographics and things like that, so that when we're out promoting the position, we can use those as the simple way of getting to the market and drive people through to the more complex job specs in the system. Which is why advertising doesn't need to be exactly the same as the ATS system. You can use these infographics and video voicemails and things to simplify and complement the stuff in the systems.
Super, thank you. And if for those of you that are having some issues with the GoToWebinar chat box that you don't see it, feel free to send me a message through SameTime. That works as well. Any other questions? Brad, we're up to 33 attendees. We gained 3.
We gained 3? I thought we were on 34.
That's 1 too. Lag time. All right, going once, going twice, going thrice. Any other questions? Okay, super. Well, Brad, thank you again for presenting today on the Sourcing Collaboration Training Call. It was a lot of great information being shared. And that concludes today's training call. Again, we will have this added to a YouTube video and disseminated probably by the end of the day tomorrow at the latest. And again, thank you again for joining, and we look forward to the next training call. I don't have anything scheduled yet, so if one of you folks are interested in presenting some material, definitely shoot me an email, and we can get you scheduled to talk on the next training call in 1 month's time. Again, Brad, thank you so much, and Hubert, we can go ahead and close today's training.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, everyone.